I'm Martha MacCallum, and here's the story. Russia headlines now including the president's inner circle. We are going to dig into this. What are the facts? What is real? What is not real? What is legal? What is illegal? What is hysteria in this story? And what are the necessary questions that need to be asked? We will also talk about what is likely mattering more to you. What's going on with health care? What's going on with tax reform in Washington? And is a big change about to happen that could get them passed with only 51 votes? That is huge news tonight. Senator Mike Lee joins us in New York in moments. Knows a lot about this, of course, and he's here in a bit. So back to story number one with Jared Kushner. The subject of intense fascination throughout the unpredictable electoral triumph of Donald J. Trump. Always at his father-in-law's side throughout the process, the 36-year-old often profiled, rarely quoted in these stories. So after the election, a lot about his data analytics brainchild. How did this team of young political outsiders manage to help Donald Trump pull off this improbable victory? Now concerns about the interactions with those bots and with these programs and with the Russians leading to speculation that maybe there was coordination between this Facebook analytics and Twitter and all of this, and the mysterious role of bots. What are they? How do they work? Flooding social media, influencing people's opinions. So the reporters at the White House today got only this.
Mr. Kushner's attorney has said that Mr. Kushner has volunteered to share with Congress what he knows about these meetings, and he will do the same if he's contacted or connected with any other inquiry.
Did the president discuss it, though?
I'm not going to get into what the president did or did not discuss.
Does he approve of that action?
You're asking if he approves of an action that is not a confirmed action.
So one person who is the only person close to Jared Kushner who's actually speaking out on the record and only here on the story is the mastermind behind that data operation that got so much praise and now so much attention. Brad Parscale, his home paper in San Antonio with this headline: San Antonio web firm might be included in probe of the Trump-Russia ties. He joins me now. Brad, thank you very much for being here tonight. Good to have you. Good to see you back on the program again. You have always been the subject of praise and admiration and great interest for this program. So now the question, now that it becomes more clear that the Russians were very involved in data, very involved in pushing things onto Facebook, pushing things onto Twitter, everyone wants to know if your work was intertwined in any way, shape, or form with theirs.
Absolutely not. I mean, this is kind of the funny thing. What's funny about this is that in the United States, we actually have access to some of the best data. And the data we use on this campaign directly came from the Republican National Committee and what they did after the 2012 election to build a data set like never seen before. We didn't need data. We didn't need it from anyone else. It was right here in the United States of America, and the best data is right here. All of that is available to corporations in America and other people in America. And that is already something that is being done by companies and something we did. We use things we have.
So we do know, according to the investigations, that the Russians tried to influence the election, that they did it through hacking into emails, and that they found ways to push things onto social media in where else? In the counties that mattered, in places like Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin. You guys were doing the same thing at the same time. Do you think, and did you ever notice anything strange? Did you ever notice, sort of floods of information or these bots that are computer generated, which push thousands of bits of information onto Twitter and Facebook? Did you ever go, that's kind of weird? What's happening with that?
Yeah. Absolutely not. It's so hard. There are so many PACs, the DNC, there's the Hillary Clinton, multiple people are out there doing that. Our campaign was running away with data we got from the Republican National Committee, advertising made down in San Antonio, Texas from a great team of people, and work under Donald Trump. And here's the funny thing about all of this is Trump might not even needed us. He might have been able to win this whole thing with just his Android and his plane and didn't need any of us. That last 1% possibly came from this data operation, those little pieces there. And what's great is people like Katie Walsh at the Republican National Committee that spent 4 years trying to build this don't get any credit for that. And the other side wants to believe this false narrative because they don't want to believe their candidate was so bad that this is even possible. And the truth is, that data was already there, and we just used it to beat a bad candidate with a great candidate.
All right. In terms of Jared Kushner, who you know well, I know you worked closely with him, and he brought you into the campaign because he liked the work, and Ivanka Trump liked the work that you'd done for them on other things. What do you make of the fact that he is now part of the not the investigation. I mean, they're interested in talking to him, and he has said he's very willing to do so.
So, you know, I don't talk to Jared a lot about what's happening in the policy portion and those kind of things. We have a friendship, and we continue to communicate. However, I can tell you about Jared Kushner, the man. This is a guy that truly cares about myself, everybody on the campaign, is intelligent. When you walk into a room with him, it's amazing what people around him, the way they respond to him. He's highly intelligent, cares about this country, and is truly a loving person. It's the hardest thing for me to almost watch this, because I really like the man, and he is a person that cares every moment about different people. And you just hate to see that happen to good Americans and people who want to move the country forward. He wants to support his father-in-law. And I just can't believe it.
So when you hear these stories, and you hear some suggestion that, well, maybe he just didn't get it. You know, maybe he was having these talks with Kislyak and with the Russian banker, and he's thinking that he's working on a good channel to open up discussion, and they're using it as a backdoor to find out information about him, about the campaign, about things they might be able to be influenced on, or the things that Russia might be able to have influence on after he became president. Is he someone that you think may have been naive at all to that kind of work?
Look, again, I can't talk about what was happening in those policy meetings or anything else. I can only tell you about the relationship I had with Jared during the campaign. And during the campaign, he was thoughtful, thorough, and did an unbelievable job to help his father-in-law get elected. I mean, he was instrumental to decisions, step after step, to make sure that Mr. Trump was always in the right position to do what he needed to do. And again, I've said this multiple times, Mr. Trump might not have needed both of us, but for the decisions he did need, Jared Kushner was there. And he is one of those guys that thinks strongly and thinks about every decision we made on the campaign to make sure that we did the right thing, and we did the right thing to help the president win.
I just want to put a quote up from Time magazine. They did a story recently sort of looking into the kind of analytics and the information war that Russia's always been engaged in through the Cold War and what level they're at with it now. It says in 2016, Russia had used thousands of covert human agents and robot computer programs to spread disinformation referencing the stolen campaign emails of Hillary Clinton, amplifying the effect of that. Knowing what you know about data, do you agree with that?
Honestly, I have no clue if any of that stuff happened. I mean, what all I was seeing, what was being done from the Democrat side versus our candidate and what we did versus the other one. The noise was great. Obviously, there was a lot of people out there talking about things. But that data, you know, we directly contacted the voters we needed to contact. I didn't worry about other things like that, and I had no idea about any of that. Yeah. And why would we? I have no idea how that even happened.
And it's worth pointing out that in the end, you know, information campaigns, and then you have actual voters who we know did go to the voting booth and they did vote for Donald Trump, and they did put him over the top, especially in those places where you all did a lot of work. So has the FBI contacted you at all to talk to you about any of this?
You know, this is one of the funny things. I haven't ever been contacted by anyone. You know, everything we did was within the rules, and we had the data come from the Republican National Committee, and we had a data team on staff to help analyze that data and determine the right content to go to the right people. Okay. And that's part of a strategy, no different than corporate world or different things to sell the right cars to the right people. We wanted to make sure that people in America saw the parts and the things that they would love about Donald Trump to make sure they would vote for him, to know that he'd be a great president for this country. And that's what we did, and that's what we continue to do, as we need to show Americans how he's pushing, you know, America first and making this country great again.
Thanks for speaking out, Brad. Very good to have you with us tonight. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Thank you very much.
So joining us now on the other side of this, any potential offenses that Jared Kushner may be looked at in terms of all of this, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge Napolitano, thank you. Good to have you with us tonight. Are you surprised, first of all, that he hasn't been contacted by the FBI?
Yeah, I am surprised because the FBI's pattern, you know, is to gather all the information it can and then let prosecutors decide what pieces fit a puzzle and whether or not anybody should be charged with a crime or whether the investigation should be dropped. I'm sure they're going to be knocking on his door because he knows a lot. He perhaps like Jared Kushner, is just a witness, not a target.
Yeah. In terms of what was going on at the time, because this is the sort of tea leaves that people are putting together, either justifiably or not justifiably, and I want to get your opinion on that. So you have the phone calls going back and forth with the Russians. You have the emails that are being released. You have investigations going on in this country that say, yes, they were absolutely trying to influence us in any way they could with flooding information, flooding our data, influencing stories about her being sick on places like Breitbart was one of the places that's named in all of this. Any of that illegal on our side, as far as you can see?
Well, it would depend upon what you're talking about, Jared. It would depend upon what he said in the conversations that he had. I mean, if he was helping the Russians to interfere with the campaign, the FBI would be very, with Hillary's campaign, the FBI would be very, very interested in that. If he was having conversations with them to learn what they were up to, or after his father-in-law's victory, to begin to establish a relationship between what would become a Trump presidency and the government of Russia.
Which is what they have said so far.
Correct.
That's what he was doing.
A simple series of conversations like that not only is not criminal, it is normal, and most president-elects have caused those conversations to come about. On the other hand, if the conversation was as if he were attempting to influence the foreign policy of the country by saying, don't do this, don't do that, because in a month and a half, the whole world is going to be different. And the Russians affected their foreign policy because of what he said to them. That would be a very serious problem that the FBI would also be looking into, because that would constitute a private citizen, Jared Kushner, influencing the foreign policy of the United States by interfering in its communications. Barack Obama, whatever you think of him, was the valid, lawful president of the United States at that time. We're talking about the time period in November and December and early January, after the election and before the inauguration. The other issue that the FBI might be interested in is what Jared Kushner said to them when he received his national security clearance. In order to get a national security clearance, there's a tremendous amount of debriefing that goes on. One of the several hundred questions is, have you ever met with any agents from the following countries? Russia would be in there. If he met with Ambassador Kislyak or any others and said no to the FBI, that would be a very serious issue for him. Lying to the FBI is a felony. There's all these leaks that he said no. I don't know how anybody could know what he said. The document he filled out is
the only thing that matters.
Correct. Is itself a top secret document.
All right. We will see. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Judge, always good to see you. So you are about to see some different faces at the White House. The long-rumored changing of the deck chairs appears to be underway to some extent. Ed Henry is here with some inside scoop on this tonight. Breaking news when we come back. And remember Devin Nunes, who went straight to the White House to alert the president about the illegal unmasking of Trump officials. He is back in the news tonight and breaking his silence next. And the Texas legislature descending into a bit of chaos with lawmakers getting into a scuffle. We'll tell you what caused that when we come back.
There was a threat made from Representative Rinaldi to put a bullet in one of my colleagues' head.
So growing signs tonight of a West Wing shakeup and some new and old names that appear to be back in the mix. First to go was Communications Director Michael Dubke, who resigned. Who is next is the question that everybody wants to know. Press Secretary Sean Spicer was back at the podium today. He had this to say about the president's communications team.
I think he's very pleased with the work of his staff. I think that he is frustrated, like I am and like so many others, to see stories come out that are patently false, to see narratives that are wrong, to see quote-unquote fake news. When you see stories get perpetrated that are absolutely false, that are not based in fact, that is troubling. And he's rightly concerned.
Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry joins us live from the White House with some breaking details on what could be in store for the Trump team in the West Wing there behind you. Ed, what do you know?
Well, good evening, Martha. What's interesting is this shows President Trump has finally started moving to retool his White House staff, but there are some signs tonight, as you suggest, that there could be bigger changes coming. In fact, two advisors to the president telling us that just yesterday you had two former campaign advisors, Corey Lewandowski and David Bossie, not just in the White House, but actually in the Oval Office meeting with the president. This is a clear signal these two former campaign aides are in the mix for potentially major posts inside the White House. For now, though, the only changes you mentioned, Communications Director Mike Dubke out after just 3 months on the job. A senior advisor to the president telling me of Dubke, quote, he saw the handwriting on the wall and punched out before he was fired. He had enough watching potential successors paraded in front of him before he got the clue. Talk about how there have been a whole bunch of top Republicans in and out of the West Wing potentially taking that job. For his part, Dubke sent an email to friends saying, the reasons for my departure are personal, but it has been my great honor to serve President Trump and this administration. It has also been my distinct pleasure to work side by side, day by day, with the staff of the communications and press departments. Among the big questions tonight are what happens to the other leader of the communications department. You mentioned Sean Spicer, the White House press secretary. A good sign for him today was the fact that he was back at the podium, even though we're hearing he's going to be taking on a lesser role in the days to come. But for Spicer and his former colleague from the Republican National Committee, Reince Priebus, who now, of course, is the chief of staff, a bad sign is the fact that you had Bossie and Lewandowski here. They were from sort of the campaign wing around the president, the campaign camp, whereas Spicer and Priebus are from that RNC camp that was not with the president early in the campaign, obviously, because they were at the RNC, Martha.
Yeah, fascinating. Ed, thank you very much.
Good to see him.
So joining me now, Pete Hoekstra, former Trump campaign national security advisor, and Michael Meehan is the CEO of Squared Communications and a Democratic strategist. Mike, let me start with you. I know you have worked closely with Mike Dubke at your company. Why did he leave?
Well, you know, Mike's a pro's pro. He's a long-term strategic communications thinker, and as your audience knows, this White House is on hyperdrive in terms of making news, and it's really hard to plan in an environment like this. I think what happens is that presidents come in with their campaign staff. It happened with Bill Clinton. His communications director, George Stephanopoulos, left after 4 months. It happened with Barack Obama's first one. These are hard transitions to make from campaigning. We have a small, tight-knit group to this multi-leveled job that the one like Mike had. And you know, when the president calls and asks you to take a job, Mike answered the call and did the best he could. But this is a very turbulent environment that they're in right now.
Yeah, Pete, there's always been sort of this divide between the inner circle, most of whom, it's worth pointing out, did not end up with a job. Kellyanne Conway did, but many of the inner circle, when you look at Corey Lewandowski, who was pushed out earlier on, and David Bossie, and even the Newt Gingriches and the Rudy Giulianis, who were very close to this thing from the very beginning, did not end up in the White House. What do you think they should do now?
Well, I think the president obviously now has a better feel for this environment and for the job. And what he recognizes now is that, coming in, the Democrats, the media, the swamp, they're fighting him, and they're not only fighting his agenda. The agenda appears to be clear for many of him. They not only want to stop the agenda, but they want to destroy Donald Trump personally, and so he's going to get in place a great communications team to recognize the different shape of the challenge that's facing him today. He also, I think, now recognizes, yes, he has to build those relationships with Congress, but to get his agenda through, to get the tax cuts through, to get health care reform through, to border security and these kinds of things, he's going to have to go to the American people, which maybe is going to require a slightly different set of skills than what he had coming into office after the inauguration. This guy's a fighter. He wants to win, and he's tooling up to make sure that he's going to be successful.
There are all these stories, Mike, that he's isolated, that he's concerned about what's going on. He was tweeting quite a bit earlier in the day today about his relationship with Germany and other things. But Pete Hoekstra makes a great point. I mean, wouldn't it be wise at this point to go to the Hill or to bring legislators to the White House to put the focus on clearly, when you ask people what they care about health care. They care about tax reform, and they don't care that much about this Russia thing. They know the investigation's ongoing, but they want the focus to be on their business.
Yeah, no, there's no question. And clearly, even though I disagreed with the outcome of the House Republican vote on health care, he clearly engaged in that level and managed to get the votes that he needed to get. So clearly, he has success in doing this. So it would be important, and given that the margins in the Senate are only 2 votes, there's opportunities to work there if he chooses to do that. The man makes tons of deals. He's really good at putting a deal together. There are deals to be put together that advance some of these important things, but you do have to roll up your sleeves and sit down and work across the aisle. Because the only lasting legislation that ever really matters is ones that have a bipartisan support, and that's why I think you see the trouble that he's having on the filibuster. McConnell wants 60 because if you really want things to last, you do need to get to 60.
Yeah, we're going to get into that with Mike Lee in just a minute. But, just in terms of that outward voice, Pete Hoekstra, is there anybody that you would like to see in front of that podium or being more sort of forward in the communications effort to articulate what the president wants to do? I mean, some people say he's the only person who can really do that.
Yeah, there's lots of good folks that are out there. I think Sean Spicer does okay. Sarah Huckabee Sanders has done, she's done a very good job in that space. There's been other people that have been, talked about going into that. I don't think it's going to be a single person. It's going to be a number of people who are unified in carrying that message out. And really what they're doing is they're amplifying the president's voice. What we've seen here in the first 4 months and in the campaign, the most effective communicator is Donald Trump.
And word is we're going to see more of him and less of anybody at the podium. So we'll see. Thank you very much, guys. Good to see you both.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
So coming up, Congressman Devin Nunes was a lightning rod in the early days of the Russia investigation. He then turned it over to Trey Gowdy and company. But there is something alarming that he wants people to know about ongoing surveillance in this country. Senator Mike Lee joins us on that. Plus new fallout from the stabbing attack that killed 2 in Portland over the weekend. Is the mayor's reaction compounding the problem? A First Amendment showdown straight ahead.
They were attacked viciously by the suspect. These were folks just riding the train and unfortunately, got caught up in this.
Breaking tonight, alarming new reports on the size and scope of the Obama administration's surveillance of the American people, including President Trump and his transition team. In this newly surfaced video, House Intelligence Committee Chair Devin Nunes, who stepped down from the House Russia investigation last month amid controversy, is seen speaking openly about what he uncovered in his probe. It's very interesting. Watch.
I went and looked at what I knew existed on the unmaskings, but what I found was a treasure trove of stuff that's really bad in terms of surveillance on America. It's really horrible because it endangers America, because the work that our intelligence professionals do is so critical to our safety. To have an administration, a past administration, abuse these powers and put our country in jeopardy, there's no words that can explain the damage that they've done, the damage that they've created.
It's pretty stunning. Here now to weigh in, Utah Senator Mike Lee, the author of the new book, Written Out of History, The Forgotten Founders Who Fought Big Government. And because of that, we get to have him here in New York. It's good to see you, Senator. Thank you for coming by. What strikes you in Devin Nunes' words? Because I know this is something that you've been concerned about a long time.
This is what governments do when they're left unrestrained. It's one of the reasons I wrote this book, Written Out of History. I talk about James Otis, among other forgotten founders, who was a big believer in the fact that governments will intrude into a man's house, into a man's privacy, unless they're specifically restricted from doing so. It's one of the reasons why we need the Fourth Amendment to tell the government that it can't do certain things to us. Seizure. Yes.
Let's put this up on the screen because this is the FISA court just recently scolding the former Obama administration. They said the court ascribed the government's failure to disclose those reviews to an institutional lack of candor on NSA's part and emphasized that, quote, this is a very serious Fourth Amendment issue. So people look at this and they think about, the unmasking and Mike Flynn and everything, but what does it mean to the normal average person?
What it means is that the government can use the overwhelming force and power of government to engage in political espionage, to engage in all kinds of manipulation in order to harm.
Like what we saw with the IRS, for example.
Like that, and worse. There was this committee back in the 70s called the Church Committee. It looked into abuses like this. It concluded that every presidential administration, starting with FDR all the way at least through Nixon, had used intelligence gathering agencies within the government to engage in political espionage. This is human nature. This is why we need a constitution. It's why we need limits on government.
Let me put up something that deals with legislation here, because this is President Trump this morning talking about health care and tax reform, which we were just talking about. I think a lot of people who voted for him would like him to get back to this business. The U.S. Senate, he said, should switch to 51 votes immediately and get health care and tax cuts approved fast and easy. Dems would do it, no doubt. What do you think?
Okay, so first of all, we have procedures in the Senate that allow us to pass certain bills without having to have 60 votes for cloture. And two of those things happen to be Obamacare repeal and tax reform. So in this instance, we don't even need to go to that discussion. Now, I have grave concerns about getting rid of the filibuster rule for other reasons. We would have had single-payer health care by now with that. We would have had card check. We would have had all kinds of things that are bad for conservatives, bad for Republicans, bad for a lot of the things that Donald Trump stands for if we had gotten rid of the filibuster rule. But here, we can repeal Obamacare and we can do tax reform.
But you can't replace it.
Depends on what we do to replace it. But we can repeal it and we can replace it with a lot of things. It's not a matter of whether we can do it. It's a matter of how we write it. There are ways to get this done with 51 votes. We don't have to go nuclear. And if we don't go nuclear, we preserve in the Senate a lot of things that will protect limited government, will protect the Constitution.
Yeah. So that would be under reconciliation. It's a budget vehicle, essentially, that proves that you're not going to add to the debt dramatically over a certain period of time, 10 years, I think it is, that allows you to pass it that way. So obviously the president's on board. He'd like to see that. I want to play this from Ben Sass and get your reaction, because here's what he said about the future of the GOP.
As you said, that you think the Republican Party and the Democratic Party both are intellectually exhausted. What does the Republican Party stand for at this point anymore?
I don't know.
Isn't that a problem? Is there anybody?
Does that surprise you?
It is a big problem in the sense that anytime anyone, especially one of our Republican senators, can't identify exactly what the Republican Party stands for, we've got a problem. Now, look, what I believe it stands for is constitutionally limited government. What I believe it stands for are free markets, not for the purpose of limiting government, just with that as the goal, but with the purpose of having stronger families, stronger individuals, so that individuals can thrive. They can
Do you
get
feel
ahead.
that the president represents that?
Yes, and I think he was elected with a mandate to fight for America's hardworking families, so that America's hardworking families and middle class can expand, can grow, can achieve. That's what we've always wanted for our people. But government, especially a big, ever-growing federal government, makes that very difficult.
And didn't some of the founders, who we don't think about that often, say exactly that?
They did. In fact, that's exactly why I've written this book, Written Out of History.
Yeah.
Because a lot of our founding fathers weren't as well known. And some of them have been neglected, even deliberately written out, because their stories, their demographics aren't convenient. They don't fit within the modern progressive narrative of a big federal government.
Give us one quick name before we go.
Mum Bet.
Don't know about it.
She was a slave in Massachusetts. And she was a fighter. She was tenacious. She understood that if all human beings are created equally and are free and equal in the eyes of God, as they were determined to be by the Massachusetts Constitution written by John Adams, that she should be free. So she sued for her freedom, and she achieved it. She won. She's a hero, but she's been forgotten.
Written Out of History by Mike Lee. Senator, thank you. Good to see you in New York. Good luck with the book.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
for stopping by. So coming up here still ahead, the U.S. military sending a message to our enemies tonight in what is being called a trial run for a North Korean attack, God forbid, on the United States. Details of the tests that just happened coming up. But first, let's play a game. Which one of these crazy scenes is some uncivilized country, and which one is happening right here in our increasingly uncivilized country? The answer when we come back.
You say things to incite people, okay? And that's exactly what I did.
A slow boil in Texas over the new sanctuary cities law bubbling over at the state capitol in Texas. It began when hundreds of protesters packed in to the rafters. They object to Governor Greg Abbott's new no sanctuary cities law for Texas. So they had to stop the session. Police came and cleared out the demonstrators. The drama did not end there, though. A Republican lawmaker said that he called ICE to report some of those protesters. Those comments throwing Democrats into a rage and setting off this ugly chain of events. Watch this.
He walked back and told us, I called ICE. And we both, what? What do you mean? You did what? He said, yeah, I called ICE. And then he said, F them.
You say things to incite people, okay? And that's exactly what I did.
That's exactly what I did. Here's now Dana Lash, host of Dana on the Blaze TV, and Robert Zimmerman, Democratic strategist and DNC committee member. You know, I remember when we used to just show scenes from South Korea and sometimes Eastern European countries where legislators were brawling, and we'd sort of look at it kind of like, oh, well, that doesn't happen here. And now, apparently it does, Dana.
Well,
or something
Martha,
close.
Yeah, thanks for having me. A couple of things to note about this as well. Matt Rinaldi, who I'm coming to you from Irving, Texas, and this is Matt Rinaldi's area. And in the Capitol building there are numerous videos that are on a bunch of different websites showing some protesters bragging about immigration status. Some were bragging about being there illegally. When you see someone who is in violation of the law, or at least going to brag about it, you know, a hazard of bragging about being in violation of the law is that you could have law enforcement called on you. And that's when Rinaldi said that he had called ICE, and that was it. Because they had been trying to drown out lawmakers. They were being disruptive to the process in Austin. And of course, that's, you know, people are there to get business done. And so when you're doing that in the chamber, yes, you're being escorted out, but don't brag about breaking the law and then not expect law enforcement to be called.
I mean, that's not too smart, Robert.
Actually, Martha, the people in the gallery who were protesting proved to be much better American citizens than certainly legislator Rinaldi did, and his colleagues who threatened violence against each other.
No. Excuse me, Robert.
Let Robert finish, Dana. Let him get his point out. Go ahead, Robert.
Excuse me. I mean, seriously, Dana. The reality
I'm sorry, Bobby.
Okay, that's better. The reality here is that those protesters out there were exercising their constitutionally protected rights. There's 130 years of constitutional legal precedent that defends the right of individuals, be they American citizens, be they undocumented Americans, to actually exercise the Bill of Rights. They're protected under the 14th Amendment, and they really showed they were truly great Americans versus people who are sitting at home right now.
I don't know. I mean, are they here illegally, or are they great Americans? Dana.
Yeah.
Actually, are great Americans.
Bob, I let you finish. Now you need to let me finish.
All right,
Try to cut me off earlier.
Dana's up.
First off, Representative Nevarez actually did physically put his hands on Representative Rinaldi. It was captured by several different video angles, and he admitted to BuzzFeed that he actually did push him. That's considered simple battery at the very least. So no, that's never, to have someone hot-headed like that in the state capitol is never good, and I think Nevarez needs to apologize for assaulting or committing battery against another lawmaker. That's never acceptable. Furthermore, that also doesn't demonstrate what Bob was just discussing in terms of practicing and demonstrating good citizenship, nor is it a good example for other Texans to be putting your hands on another lawmaker because you're hot-tempered.
That's not what I said.
I think that there should be some public censure for that. Now, as far as the protesters go, again, this goes back to don't brag about being in the country illegally and then be surprised if someone says that they're going to call ICE.
Yeah, I mean, that's just Robert. But there is the question of the in-your-face illegality of standing there sort of na-na-na-na-na saying, I'm here illegally, but what are you going to do about it? So then he says, you know what? I'm going to call ICE. That's what I'm going to do about it.
The courts have ruled, Martha, on what you can do legally. When you're engaging in free speech, you're exercising your constitutional rights.
Even if you're an illegal citizen, you're not even legally in the country, and you're not a citizen.
Martha, there's 130 years of constitutional judicial precedent that defends the right of individuals, whether they be citizens or whether they be undocumented, to exercise to have the right of due process, and also to be able to exercise their rights under the Bill of Rights.
To protest, but not to stop legislative action from happening. Go ahead, Dana.
I'll bring up another quick point. One of the things that this sanctuary city bill that Greg Abbott signed is supposed to protect, it's supposed to protect us Texans against those who would break the law. For instance, in Travis County with Sheriff Sally Hernandez, who's very much politicized this, I just want to point everyone out to the fact that her office actually refused an ICE detainer for an accused child molester who had been accused of longstanding sexual molestation of a young girl, and Sally Hernandez did not consider molestation of a child to be one of the four cases that she would think.
We got to leave it there. I got to go.
That's one of the things that the law actually was signed to prevent.
We got to go.
Martha.
All right. So the city of Portland rattled after a known white supremacist allegedly stabbed and killed two innocent people on a train. But now the mayor's response to potentially shut down speech has people concerned that he is making this issue worse. We debate next.
They have a First Amendment right to speak, but my pushback on that is that hate speech is not protected.
Tonight, the mayor of Portland trying to shut down so-called free speech events after a self-described white supremacist killed two men and badly injured a third at the beginning of the weekend. Here's new video of the suspect as he went to court today. His name is Jeremy Joseph Christian. He is accused of aggravated murder and a host of other charges. Trace Gallagher joins us live with the background in Los Angeles. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Martha. While Portland homicide detectives continue scouring Jeremy Christian's background, motive, and social media footprint, we got a first-hand look at Christian's erratic behavior in court today. Watch this.
Free speech or die, Portland. You got no safe place. This is America. Get out if you don't like free speech. Death to the enemies of America. Leave this country if you hate our freedom. You call it terrorism, I call it patriotism. You hear me? Die.
Last Friday on board a Portland train, that same type of verbal assault was apparently being directed at 2 Muslim women, including one wearing a hijab. Witnesses say when 3 men tried to calm the suspect and shield the women, Jeremy Christian fatally stabbed 2 of the men and injured a 3rd. Back in April, Christian was photographed at a free speech march in Portland wearing an American flag, shouting racial slurs and giving a Nazi salute. And here's an event organizer who also came in contact with Christian. Listen to him.
Insane guy, like insane, and he was there to cause problems. He was there to cause trouble, and we kicked him out. Like, we didn't want him there. We marched with him for a little bit, but the police warned us. They said, you got to be careful of this guy. He's a dangerous guy.
Jeremy Christian also shared white supremacist views on Facebook and posted a death threat about Hillary Clinton. On top of that, he's been convicted for robbery and kidnapping. Meantime, in an effort to ease white supremacist activity, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler wants federal authorities to cancel 2 upcoming protests, including an anti-Islam march, saying, and I'm quoting, "Our city is in mourning. Our community's anger is real, and the timing and subject of these events can only exacerbate an already difficult situation." But the ACLU is now fighting back, saying if the government is allowed to shut down free speech, we'll all pay the price down the line. Martha.
Trace, thank you. So here now, Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist, and Julie Roginski, a Democratic analyst. Both are Fox News contributors. Good to see you both tonight.
Great to see you.
Molly, let me start with you. What's your reaction to this story?
This is just the worst reaction you can have to the violence of what happened in Portland, is to shut down free speech events. The mayor has absolutely no authority to do this, and it's just not healthy or wise. Also, Portland has a long history of tolerating rather extreme rhetoric from people on the other side of the aisle. They've posted violent World Trade Organization protests. They had one of the more notorious Occupy camps, and they even recently tolerated the Antifa, anti-Trump protests, some of which got violent. So this idea that you would shut down this just doesn't even make sense by Portland's own standards.
Yeah. Julie, is it fair to group this man, this alleged killer, whose behavior no one condones, with this organization that wants to march and, you know, like any organization, has the right to march and peacefully protest?
Listen, what this organization stands for is deplorable, and certainly what this man has allegedly done is beyond deplorable, but the organization has the right to march. I supported neo-Nazis marching in Skokie back in the 70s when this was a huge controversy. Certainly the Ku Klux Klan has marched and has gotten permits to march, and I support that as well, though I don't agree with anything that they stand for. What's that phrase? I may not agree with what you're saying, but I'll defend to the right, to the death your right to say it. That's what we stand for. That's what the First Amendment stands for. And no government entity has the right to tell people what to believe and what to say. And marching, if you have a permit to march, is part of that First Amendment right that we all enjoy, regardless of whether you agree with our views or not.
Yeah. Free speech is protected, even if it's hate speech, which none of us like to witness, but it also embodies something that we all hold very dear, which is people's right to speak their mind, Molly, as long as they do it peacefully.
Right, and if people are worried about authoritarian tendencies, having the mayor or a government official claim that there's no constitutional right to certain kinds of speech just because he opposes the viewpoint of that speech, I mean, that is dangerous rhetoric and something that he should know better. And he initially said he just thought it would be a better idea if these rallies didn't happen, which might be true, but to then go on and say that it's actually, that there is no constitutional right to this speech, I mean, that's
misguided and wrong and bizarre. You would expect something more authentic and more factual coming out of the mouths of the mayor of Portland. Speaking of hate speech, though, I want to show everyone. I have to warn you because this is so vulgar and so vulgar is really the best word for it. Kathy Griffin, who's supposed to be a comedian, was in a photography shoot and put this picture up of her holding a mask, bloody head depicting Donald Trump. So we're going to put it down, but we wanted to show you it because that's what she put up there. Julie, I mean, how, in the conversation involving hate speech and what's vulgar and what is wrong, how can she in good conscience do this?
Well, again, I certainly find this photograph deplorable and don't condone it at all. But if we're talking about free speech and the right to say it, she has as much right to pose with that shot as others do. As Ted Nugent had to say deplorable things about Hillary Clinton, as others had the right to say what they say. Again, this is all part of free speech. You don't have to condone the speech in order to believe that she has the right to do what she did.
Quick thought, Molly, and we got to go.
It's also true that there should be consequences for this type of violent imagery, and I think people who employ Kathy Griffin should be asked if she continues to work for them, such as hosting the New Year's Eve special at CNN, or Al Franken is doing an event with her next week. He should be asked whether he thinks that's appropriate as well. Consistency is key.
Thank you both. Good to see you.
Thanks very much.
So coming up next, the message that our military just sent to the North Koreans, and some final thoughts tonight from Alexander Hamilton on defense.